Hello and welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly video recap from Reboot Illinois. I'm Madeline Dubeck, here with an under-the-weather Matt Dietrich, but he did not disappoint and he is here for us again today. And we want to tell you that for the third week in a row, the governor and the four legislative leaders, this time minus House Speaker Mike Madigan, for unknown reasons as we record this, met again to talk about the stalemate. And that's something that you've done a lot of reflecting on lately,
Right.
Matt. And you've noted that and probably a lot of people in Illinois voted for Bruce Rauner for governor, thinking that split government would be a
Right.
good thing, like it used to be back in the old days.
Yeah, and this came out of a couple of events actually that happened at the City Club of Chicago last week and this week. And it sort of clicked with me that, a lot of people, I think, in November 2014 voted for Bruce Rauner because they were longing for the period of time, the 26 years from 1977 to 2003, when, with only a couple of years of exception, you had a Republican governor and either one chamber or both chambers controlled by Democrats. There were a couple of years when the Republicans had all three, but mostly during that 26-year span, it was shared government, shared power. And for the most part, you had what I refer to as a healthy tension between
Right.
the Republican governor and whatever composition of the General Assembly there was between Democrats and Republicans. Both sides knew that if the state broke down into dysfunction, it would be bad for them, be bad for the state. So they disagreed a lot.
And there were overtime sessions
Right.
on occasion.
And there were times, when you didn't have a budget for a few weeks into the summer.
Right.
But we never had anything like what we're seeing now, where you're going 6 months with no budget, where you've got courts issuing court orders to authorize spending, and then the legislature occasionally going in and passing some piecemeal type of spending bill that's not a full budget, that we're freely now going into about a $5 billion deficit throughout this fiscal year because we're spending more than is coming in. And
Could be as high as $8 billion, the comptroller has said, by the
Right.
time in a couple weeks.
well, and something that occurred to me was, if you look back at the vote totals in November 2014, Bruce Rauner won. He got 1.8 million votes. But at the same time, you had a vote on an advisory question about a millionaire tax,
Right.
an advisory question on raising the minimum wage immediately. And those got in the vicinity of 2.2 million votes. Quite a bit more than voted for Bruce Rauner. And I think, to me, that's indicative that people really wanted a change. They were really tired of Pat Quinn. So I think that a lot of people voted Republican this time, thinking, hey, let's get some shared government going.
So they're
here.
thinking back to the era of Big Jim Thompson, George Ryan,
And-
Jim Edgar.
right.
So now we wanted the healthy tension. All we got was a whole lot of tension.
Now we've got complete. It's like it's not really a tug of war anymore. It's both sides. Neither side's going to pick up the rope, and they both want an unconditional surrender from each other. Bruce Rauner on one side and Mike Madigan on the other. And it really struck me last week when Mike Madigan spoke before the City Club. He made a statement about. Someone asked him a question about, how can you say you're a guardian of the middle class when so much has gone wrong with Illinois government over the last 12 years with Democrats in power? I thought his answer really was insightful if you want to know the depth of the differences between he and Bruce Rauner philosophically. Here's what Mike Madigan said.
This goes right to the heart of the difference of opinion between myself and the governor. And so as part of my remarks, I explained that I feel that his position on certain of these issues would lower wages and the standard of living of middle-class families. And I would follow up by explaining that the history of the American government prior to 1933 was pretty much to remain out of the business of managing the economy. However, beginning in 1933 with the administration of Franklin Roosevelt, there was a dedicated effort by the federal government to, in effect, manage the economy and to work always to create jobs, to raise wages, to raise the standard of living. That is obtained through both Democrat and Republican administrations. That was the policy of the Roosevelt administration for 20 years, and it was followed by Truman. Eisenhower became the president. No change. Same idea, that it's the responsibility of the federal government working through the Congress and the Federal Reserve to, in effect, manage the economy. Raise wages, raise the standard of living, work to prevent too much inflation. That's been the policy of the country for all of these years, and that's where I say I don't think any government should be in the business of lowering wages and the standard of living. That the responsibility upon the government is to move in the opposite direction, to do what the government can do and do well, raise wages on a continuing basis, and maintain a good standard of living for everybody in the country.
Clearly, to Madigan, government is there to help improve the quality of life, to keep wages going up. Bruce Rauner is just the opposite. He wants government out. To him and to people who think like him, government shouldn't be there to help you raise your wages. Government should get out of the way so that job creators can create jobs and get more people working and grow the economy that way. Those are very much philosophies at odds with one another. Now, the other thing is that what's been very frustrating for those of us who long for the good old days of a healthy tension is knowing that there are areas where these two sides can compromise,
right.
and they simply won't do it. And we won't get in today. There's a lot of timing about the election, and nobody wants to vote for a tax increase before the primary and blah, blah, blah. But there are so many areas where they could compromise and find some middle ground.
Sure. I mean, you and I have said before that they could do something on workers' comp and property taxes and, take some votes on some of the redistricting kinds of measures, and that's all the governor's asked for in that regard.
Right. And on either side, you don't have to gut collective bargaining to do it. And so this came up, what struck me when Rich Miller, who publishes the Capital Facts newsletter and whose column we publish on rebootillinois.com, he spoke this week at the City Club, and he tossed out a perfect example of a compromise on workers' comp where it could be an easy starting point for him to get going. Now, here's what Rich Miller had to say.
In 2005, the General Assembly passed and the then governor signed a bill into law that made some tweaks to workers' comp. And one of the things that it did was, and I'm just going to breeze right over this, all right? Permanent partial disability benefits were increased by 7.5%. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it rocketed up the cost of insurance. So somebody had pointed this out on my blog, a commenter. Well, no, he's a workers' comp attorney, Louis Atzes. All right, so I posted it on the blog, and then I pointed this out to the governor's office. And they looked at this and said, this can save more money than causation. If we get this, workers' comp is done. Now, rolling back a 7.5% benefit increase is not going to put one person on welfare or send one person to the emergency room. That is a doable, possible fix. Will some workers going forward not get as much money? Yes. But how about, we try to get something done? This proved to raise workers' comp insurance rates. By passing it, repealing it, we may be able to lower workers' comp insurance rates. I think, however, that Madigan's also right. There needs to be some more oversight of these insurance companies.
So there's one possibility.
Sure.
Now, the thing is, we're hearing these ideas from people like us. I wrote a blog post this week where I linked to a column from Charlie Wheeler, who was a longtime Chicago Sun-Times bureau chief in Springfield and now heads the public affairs reporting program at the University of Illinois at Springfield. In August, he did a column for Illinois Issues that had, I don't know, half a dozen different suggestions, perfectly good compromises. But you have, in this case, both sides dug in so far.
Right.
And you have, and the crux of it is, Mike Madigan simply will not entertain or even acknowledge the idea that anything the Democrats did over the last 12 years created the fiscal mess that we're in. At the same time, Governor Rauner will not recognize that he was elected in a state that also where more people voted for a millionaire tax than voted for him, and those same voters have elected super majorities, veto-proof majorities of Democrats
Right.
in both the House and the Senate. Those are two things
Realities.
that, yes, they need to recognize. Both sides need to recognize these things. The Democrats need to say, look, we had control for 12 years and boy, things really went off the rails and man, our unemployment shot up and we've never got into the economic recovery like we should have, like other states did. Maybe there are
Maybe
some
we
things
should
that we
change some
did.
things.
Yeah, like what Rich Miller suggested. Bruce Rauner, on the other hand, has to say, well, I know I'm not going to get these guys to go after collective bargaining. There are so many Democrats out there, and they're just not going to convert to Republicans overnight. That's a couple of realities that both sides need to accept.
All right. Unfortunately, compromise is elusive and still a dirty
Right.
word in Illinois and in national politics.
Yeah, very true. We're getting our own taste of Washington here in
We are.
Springfield is what we're getting.
Exactly. All right. So that's it for this week's edition. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next edition of Only in Illinois.